Shalom and welcome back to our study of the book of Micah. There are 8 sessions in this study. This is session 3. If you have not worked sessions 1 and 2, you can find them in the on-demand on Roku TV. We have been doing work on the website, which is BibleInteract.tv. There you can download a study guide, you can enter into discussion, and there are activities that you can do there. We are now ready for session 3. I call this the breaker and those who break out. It's Micah chapter 2, verses 12 and 13. It's just 2 verses. We're going to take a whole session working on 2 verses. And in fact, at the end of the last session, I gave you some homework. I gave you a little brief preview of what we're going to be doing. I gave you some homework, and we're going to go over the homework right now. What I did is I asked you to use a concordance to find the Hebrew word translated breaker. There was breaker and break out. It was repetition, and that's a clue that it's something important. And you found that word breaker, English word breaker, in Micah 2:13. Using a concordance, you made a list of the 7 verses in the Torah where the Hebrew word appears. I'm having you work on the Hebrew word, not the English word. And then for each of the 7 verses, you had to read the verse in its context, which means the surrounding verses that give you the complete meaning of that one specific verse. And then I ask you, what is the rich depth of meaning that you have found? Okay, what we're going to do now is I am going to take you to the 7 verses. You should have done the work. You know, if you wait for me to do the work, maybe you'll learn a tiny bit. Maybe you'll get through first grade, but you certainly won't graduate through high school. You have to dig in, roll up your sleeves, and do the work yourself to really learn how to do it and to get into the depth of meaning. So let's take a look at the 7 verses. You should have found these 7 verses. The Hebrew word is paratz, and you can learn the Hebrew alphabet on our website, and you learn to pronounce the Hebrew, paratz. And here are the 7 verses. Okay, let's take a look at the 7 verses. Okay, we have Genesis 28:14. Your descendants will be, this is a prophecy of something future, folks. Let's look at it, prophetic future. Your descendants, Abraham, will also be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out. That's our word, paratz. You will spread out to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south, and in you and in your descendants shall all the families of the earth be blessed. So what we have here is we have a great abundance. It's coming from something small, and it's growing into a great abundance of people, great abundance of descendants, okay? Now, let's take a look at the next verse. The next verse, in fact, I've got 2 of the verses here. Jacob was in exile for 20 years, and we read, you, referring to Laban, his father-in-law, had little before I came, says Jacob. You had little before I came, and it has increased, that's our word paratz, to a multitude. And that's referring to the animals that Jacob was shepherding. And so again, you get this. It's like an explosion. It's an explosion to a large number. Here it's a large number of sheep. Before we had a large number of people. And then in Genesis 30:43, so the man, referring to Jacob, in fact, I'm not sure whether it refers to Jacob or Laban. I'm not sure here. But you know because you worked this. So the man became exceedingly prosperous, and that's our word paratz again. So that paratz has something to do with something small turning into something large. So let's go on and take a look at 2 more verses. There were 7 of them. We'll look at 2 more. We're in Exodus now. Let the priests who come near to the Lord, you cannot come near to the Lord, into the Lord's presence, unless you're in a righteous condition. So in order to come near to the Lord, they have to consecrate themselves. They have to make themselves holy. They did that symbolically with water, but water only symbolizes the inner part, so they had to be holy, or else the Lord will break out against them. Now we've got a very interesting use of the word paratz, to break out. And So that God is going to do something it's not going to be a little thing, it's going to be a real big thing. So if you try to come before the Lord and you are not in a holy, righteous condition, the Lord will break out against you. And then let's look now at Exodus 19:24. The Lord said to him, "Go down and come up again, you and Aaron." So he's speaking to Moses here. Go down. They're up on, go down. That's Moses. Go down and come up, you and Aaron with you. But do not let the priests and the people break through Paratz to come up to the Lord up on Mount Sinai, or he, God, will break forth Paratz upon them. So if the people are breaking through in order to go up to the mountain, this is not a good thing because they're not in a holy condition. And if they do, God will Paratz, he will break out against them. Okay? Now, what I've done here is I have put together my thoughts of patterns. I asked you to do that. That's a hard thing to do. I find with my students, they can do the word study, they can see the verses, they can look at individual verses, but to put it together into a pattern is very difficult for them. So I hope you tried, and I hope you came up with some patterns. I'm going to share with you now the patterns that I saw, and then I'm going to show you how I drew those patterns, how I came up with those patterns, okay? So let's take a look at the patterns. Number one, Paratz can mean an explosive increase in Paratz, both material possessions and people. So that's the first pattern. The first pattern is an explosion of increase. And the increase we saw was either descendants, which is people, or we could see Jacob with these material possessions, the sheep, material possessions. So it's an explosion from something small to something big that is an increase to something very large. Okay, let's take a look at the second pattern. The second pattern is that this seems to apply to the prophetic future. Okay, so I'm seeing a pattern here. I'm seeing that Paratz is used not of things that are happening now. Even Jacob, when it happened to him and he got this abundance of sheep, the purpose is to point to something future. So this word Paratz is connected with, and we call it end times. It's not necessarily the end, but it means things that are coming in the future, prophetic future. So that's the second pattern that I saw. Okay, I saw a third pattern. Let's take a look at the third pattern. The third pattern, there is a contrast. So we've got opposites between Paratz referring to God's people and Paratz referring to God's judgment. So this is very typical of Hebrew, is to have a contrast. Very often you get the contrast with the word but. So you have something that's godly but something that's worldly. Or you can start with something worldly but you go to something that's godly. So we have this great abundance of people, great abundance of possession for God's people. This is a wonderful thing, but if you're not walking in godly ways, God can break out against you in judgment. So we have that opposite. I saw a fourth pattern. All right, let's look at that. The fourth pattern is that God will select a remnant that is holy, because this remnant is going to come into God's presence, and it has work to do. It has a role to play in the future. And God is in the process of selecting that future, that remnant that will play a role in the future, and that remnant has to be holy. So I saw those four patterns. Now, you may have seen one pattern, you may have seen no patterns, you may have seen more than one pattern, I don't know. You have to practice doing these word studies. You do a word study because you're curious. You see something that's strange or puzzling, it draws your curiosity. You use a concordance to do a word study on the Hebrew word, not the English word. And then from your list of verses, you are looking for a pattern. Now, let's take a look at the first pattern. The first pattern actually is to burst forth into new life. So I didn't even put that in as a pattern, but that's a pattern. To burst forth into new life. Judah, Yehudah, was one of the 12 sons of Jacob. He was not born to the birthright. He was the fourth son born. He was not born to the birthright. But he is going to go through, just like Jacob, he's going to go through trials and tribulations that is eventually going to make him worthy of the birthright. And we're going to see 2 of Jacob's 12 sons receiving the characteristics of the birthright. The birthright is a very special inheritance, and I identify the remnant as those who will inherit the birthright. You had to be worthy in God's eyes to inherit that special inheritance of the birthright. And Judah is eventually going to inherit the birthright. But this particular story, he's in a crunch. He's learning. He's walking in ungodly ways, and God is having to instruct him through this process of judgment so that eventually he will become worthy of the birthright. He was married, and mistake number 1, he married a Canaanite woman. Well, you're not supposed to do that. And he had 3 sons, and they were all ungodly. Well, the first one was ungodly, and he died. And that was God's judgment. Okay, the second one now is supposed to take, it is supposed to, produce seed. Okay, but he ends up dying. And the third one is supposed, okay, Tamar was the wife of the oldest son. When her husband died, the levirate marriage custom was that she was given now in marriage to the second son. But he didn't want to have relationships, so it says that he spilled his seed. In other words, he wasn't about to have her. He didn't want her. So God caused the second son to die. So now Tamar is supposed to marry the third son, but he's just a little guy. And so she has to wait until he grows up. So she goes back to her family, and she waits until the little one, the youngest son, grows up. But then Judah is doing nothing to give her any sense that he's going to give her to the little son so that she can bear a child, because that's the role of women in the ancient world, was to bear children. So she did a trick on Judah. She dressed up as a prostitute, and Judah took her as a prostitute. And so she's going to bear a child with Judah, okay? So it's still in the line of Judah. Now, let's go to our slide. We read, while Tamar was giving birth, there were 2 twins. One put out a hand, and the midwife took and tied a scarlet thread on his hand, saying, this one came out first. But it came about as he drew back his hand that, behold, his brother came out. It's similar to Esau and Jacob. It's the same concept here, the twins, and the one that was going to be born first, the second one actually was the one that's going to get the birthright. Now let's look at it here in Hebrew. I'm going to read it in English first. How you have burst forth, because of you a breach. It's using the same word breach as paratz, and he called his name Peretz. So we have paratz 3 times. How you have burst forth. Ma paratzta. How you've burst forth, and we get that word. Because of you a breach. Alecha peretz. This breach, this thing that's broken forth. And he called his name Peretz. Veikra shemo Peretz. So we've got paratz repeated 3 times. This is significant. And this is the new life bursting forth. But it's not just any new life. It's the new life that is going to be righteous and holy and worthy to be selected by God to be the remnant, because the firstborn is the one who got the birthright unless he was declared unworthy, and then it was given to another son. Okay. Now we get the story of Jacob, who had to leave because he stole the birthright from he bought the birthright from his brother Esau, and he stole the blessing. So he had to leave and go up to Padan Aram. He was up there for 20 years. And on his way up to Padan Aram, he had a dream, and that's that Jacob's ladder. Now we go to the dream of Jacob's ladder. And we're going to see descendants like sand in the sea. So that's explosion of those descendants. Your descendants, God says to Jacob, will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out paratz. That'll be that explosion of descendants to the west and the east and the north and the south. And in you and in your descendants shall all the families of the earth be blessed. That's that explosion of descendants. Okay, now what I want to do at this point is I want to take a look at the Hebraic concept of time. And we have to look at the Greek sense of time, which is points on a line. Actually, let me show it to you, points on a line. That's the easiest way to do it, because I want to show you these future things that are going to happen. Okay, let's take a look at the timeline. In the beginning, we get the creation, and then we have the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and some people make Joseph one of the patriarchs, but it's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. All right, then we get Israel, the people of Israel. Then we get the church. That's where we are now. At the end of the church period, we're going to get a great tribulation of 7 years. That's followed by the millennial kingdom. In the end of time, we get a great white throne judgment. There is a period of time, and I am working hard to see it comes between the millennial kingdom and the great white throne judgment, because at the end of the millennial kingdom, Satan will be loosed for a while. He's been in chains during the millennial kingdom, and then he's set free, and you get a final battle with Gog and Magog. So something happens that, and the remnant, I believe, are the ones who are going into the millennial kingdom, and they have a role to play. There's a role for the millennial kingdom that will make it possible for all God's children to come into his presence at the great white throne judgment. That's just the way I see it. Now, let me show you here, so that the Passover is what creates the people of Israel. We call it Pesach, Passover. That Passover in Egypt created the people of Israel. Pentecost, which is Shavuot, created the church. The church are those with faith in Yeshua, the Son of God, both Jew and Gentile, those with faith in Yeshua. At the end of the church time, we get the Great Tribulation. I think that will be Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I think Rosh Hashanah is the call to judgment. Yom Kippur is the actual judgment. I believe there's going to be a selection of a remnant at that time. Then comes the millennial kingdom. That question mark, I don't know. And at the very end of time is Sukkot. That's when you live in a sukkah, and the symbolism is that the roof is not solid, it's stripped so that you can look up and you're one with God. That's the end of time. Sukkot represents the end of time, and I believe that the remnant has made it possible for all of God's children to come into his presence at the end of time. So we're just kind of looking at my perspective here, and I've written that 3-part series on the remnant. Now, let me give you a little quiz. We read, your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out, that's parats, to the west and the east and the north and the south, and in you and in your descendants shall all the families of the earth will be blessed. We've just read that. That was the Jacob's ladder. All right. What is this talking about? Is it talking about the abundance of descendants of the church? Are these abundance of descendants the church? Will this abundance occur during the millennial kingdom, or will this prophecy, will it occur at the end of time? Which one of those 3 will you choose? Now, you're going to choose one of those. I mean, I'm going to take you into what I'm seeing here, and I'm going to do it with verses. Okay. So, I see an abundance of possessions and people. Look at this. The more they afflicted the people of Israel in Egypt when they were slaves, the more they multiplied and the more they spread out. This is absolutely fascinating, because we are in a time now where we undergo suffering and persecution. I mean, look around you. We're not in a time of peace. Times are tough, folks. The way we respond will determine whether we will be selected to be part of the remnant or not. But God is saying that the persecution ultimately in future time is going to cause this great explosion, because it's not the persecution itself, it's the way you respond to the persecution. Are you going to respond by standing for God, or are you going to respond by following the ways of the world? It's a fascinating picture, I think, of the future. Let's take a look at another verse. Okay, God's army leaves worldly possession. Let's read it. At the end of 430 years, to the very day, all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. That's referring to, the word host refers to an army. When the children of Israel escaped from Egypt, they all went and they were an army, and I think that's looking at the time that I'm looking for, that question mark. I think that's all God's children, and they're escaping, and they're coming out as an army. Now what we're seeing in the next verse is we're seeing that God's army is going to burst through the enemy. This is all prophetic of future times. They're going to burst through the enemy. Let's take a look at it. This is David talking. The Lord has broken through, that's paratz, my enemies before me, like the breakthrough, that's paratz, of waters. So this is David talking, but he's remembering when God parted the Red Sea, and that was a breakthrough of waters. And now David says, the Lord is causing this breakthrough for me to break through the enemy. I think this is prophetic of a future time, and I think it's prophetic of that question mark that I'm looking at. It's all prophetic, and it's up for discussion. There's going to be discussion on the website. It's going to be very interesting discussion on the website. And I may even do a webinar because this is so powerful. Webinar, but we'll give you information on that through the newsletter. Okay, let's go back to Micah now. The breaker goes up before them. They break out, pass through the gate, and go out by it. That the gate is referring to the gate that holds in the sheep pen, because we've just read about the sheep. And at night they're in, and the gate holds them, and they're protected. But now when the gate is removed, they're coming out from that protection, and there's something to do with that breakout. And we've just read about that breakout. I think it's the remnant, because in the context of Micah, it's talking about a remnant, and the sheep. And remember how they were noisy, and they were like, they were coming out, and they're coming out to be an army against Satan. And I believe this is the Great Tribulation, and that will cause Satan to be chained during the millennial kingdom. So I think this particular passage in Micah is talking about the remnant. It uses the term remnant. So it's talking about the remnant, and I think this is the Great Tribulation, and very difficult time, very great suffering, and those who stand will be selected by God to be part of the remnant. Now, you practice standing in your life today, and you practice repenting and changing and becoming more and more God-like the best you can do. You can't be perfect, and God only sees the heart. So, it's your heart that He's looking at, and so I think this what we just saw here, the breaker goes out before them. They break out, pass through the gate, and go out by it. I think these are the sheep going out through the pen. They're no longer protected. They're out, and they're able to fight as an army. Okay, so what follows that is, so their king goes on before them, and the Lord at their head. Clearly that's Yeshua. Yeshua is the commander of the army. And those who are worthy of the remnant have submitted to Yeshua as their Lord. Lord means the boss. That's what it means. And they've submitted in humble obedience. They obey Him. And furthermore, they serve Him. They work for Him. You don't have to serve in a big way. If you're a mom, you're serving as a mom with your children. You're serving as a wife with your husband. It doesn't have to be a biggie. You're serving wherever you are, the situation, wherever God has placed you. You're serving in that role, in that situation, wherever God places you. And you've made Yeshua Lord in your life. And He is at your head. Okay, let's take a look at Hebrew again. Okay, the Lord at their head. The word head is Rosh, from which we get Rosh Hashanah. That's the first. That's followed by Yom Kippur and Sukkot. So that's the first of the fall festivals, Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the year. So it can mean head, it can mean leader, it can be beginning. The Lord at their head. Could this be Rosh Hashanah? Is that what that festival is pointing to? I don't know. That's up for discussion. Now let's ask you a little test again. I will surely gather the remnant of Israel. I will put them together like sheep in the fold, like a flock in the midst of its pasture. They will be noisy with men. The breaker goes up before them. They break out, pass through the gate, and go out by it. So their king goes on before them, and the Lord at their head. All right. Is Yeshua leading the church now? Is that what this is talking about? Is this talking about now? Yeshua leading the church now. Is that passage talking about it will occur during the millennial kingdom? Is this passage talking about this prophecy will occur at the end of time? Up for discussion. I don't answer it. You discuss with a study partner, I hope. You go to the website, BibleInteract.com. That's what it is. And what we're going to do, let's take a look at it. What we're going to do in the next session, after you've done your homework, after you've gone to the website and you've worked on the Micah 2 verses 12 and 13, we're going to go into the last days. That's what everybody wants to see. Micah 3, 1 to 4, 8. What will happen now the last days doesn't mean the very, very, very end. It just means everything that's future. So Micah is a prophet. He's going to be talking about future times. We're going to be seeing future times. His theme of judgment and redemption is going to be woven into it. So I trust I will see you in the next session when we will go into Micah and we will see what he is talking about on the last days. For that, I wish you shalom.
Bible Interact, uncovering the mysteries of the kingdom of God. At BibleInteract.tv, you will penetrate the scriptures of the Bible. At our store, you're just one click away from owning your favorite books, DVDs, or study guides. Earn a degree from our university and watch hundreds of video presentations from biblical scholars, archaeologists, and theologians. By subscribing to Bible Interact, you'll find all the resources you'll need, so why not subscribe today? Go to www.BibleInteract.tv. You'll be glad you did. Interested in studying more about the temple, the Messiah, or what God's plan is for our future? No problem. We've got you covered. With more than 200 DVDs, books, and workbooks, you'll find the answers you've been searching for. Bible Interact, uncovering the mysteries of the kingdom of God.